My name is Tim. Some people call me Max. It started out as a joke, and then it took me way too long to figure out that the joke was not funny. By the time I did, it was too late, and people got confused. So whatever works. I'm a designer of the best kind. I have a lot of Twitter followers, and that makes me a thought leader. Same. I was part of the Instagram team when they got acquired by Facebook for $1 billion. That was a big number back then. The numbers have changed. I'm going to let you finish reading that bottom piece. Pretty important. People get confused. So, change is ever present in the career of a designer. I've been doing this now for I think 20 years ago is when I first did View Source. Kind of got inspired to start designing websites. But change is incredibly uncomfortable, and your instinct is to fight it. I'm going to go over a couple of some of the most frequent changes that you can get across, you come across in your career, and kind of talk through them. This talk to me, putting it together, was like therapy, because it allowed me to look back and look at all of the mistakes I made, and hopefully, I can help you not make those same mistakes and be prepared for whatever the next step in your career is going to be. There's going to be a lot in this talk. If you have any questions about anything, you can find me later, and we can talk more in detail. Throughout your career, you're going to see that the size of your company changes. Sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically. The company I currently work for, I was one of the first ones there. Today, we're over 100 people. That is a lot of change. I think at Dropbox, I saw the team go from, 300 when I joined to over 1,000 when I left. Also a lot of change, completely different types of change. The way as a company, the way you build products, whether you're an engineer or designer, working together, is something that I like to call the dance. And bear with me, this is going to make sense. The dance is basically, you have your start point and the goal, the thing that you want to achieve. And then you go and you do explorations, you zig and you zag, you dance, this is how I dance. But it's a simple process. You might have seen a graph that looks kind of similar. The design process starts off messy and then it kind of ebbs out. But you try to get from point A to point B. By yourself, single person, super easy, you're fully in control. When you add a second person to the mix, things get a bit more tricky. You need to coordinate with each other. You need to zig and you need to zag at the same pace and not lose touch with each other throughout. As you add more and more people to your team, this dance gets more and more complicated to the point where someone might overshoot the goal. Another person might completely miss the goal. So I think by the time your company's around 50 people or something, this becomes a real issue. Luckily, big companies have an amazing way to make sure that people kind of stay closer together, go at the same pace, and it's what I like to call the gutter of meetings. It's a very similar concept. You have your start point and your end point. It's just they put all these meetings around that allow people to work together in a more narrow way, less chance that people go too far to the left or to the right. I laugh, but meetings are good, obviously, if you have an acceptable amount of them. If you have too many meetings, this gutter gets too narrow and basically becomes a choke point, and no work gets done, as I'm sure a lot of people have experienced. Another thing that helps is squads. Squads, I don't really like the name. It's like sub-teams or teams or groups or sub-organizations, whatever you want to call it. And instead of having a single start point and goal, you kind of split it up. You figure out what are some of the themes inside our company that we're working on, and then put together a couple of engineers and a couple of designers and maybe a PM into smaller groups. And each of these smaller groups then go from point A to point B, and typically this means they're more in sync. A little intermezzo, a question I get asked a lot is, what's the right size of company to work at? Like, I'm thinking about joining I want a new job, basically, but I don't know where to go. Do I go for something small or something big? Do I go for a startup or maybe a more enterprisey company? There's a lot in between here, just saying. But like as a startup, you have a huge impact. There aren't a lot of people there, and hopefully any work that happens has a large impact. Well, at the enterprise level, because you're with a lot more and there is more structure and there's a smaller impact. Startup, a lot of flexibility because you have a small team, easy to stay in sync. It's quite joyful. At a large enterprise, there's a little bit less flexibility because there's a lot more structure to keep in mind when you're doing your work. Startups ship often. They tend to work on something, ship it, work on something, ship it. With the enterprise, shipping is less often, and instead of shipping every week, you might ship twice a year. I've seen worse, I've seen better. At a startup, you're always heads down. You're always doing the work. For me, I love doing the work. I'm not manager-type material, so I absolutely love doing the work, while at a bigger company, you have your gutter of meetings. On the flip side of that, at a startup, you're always heads down, while at larger companies, you have the luxury to learn. There are budgets to learn, budgets to go to conferences, budgets to take online courses and all that, things that a startup cannot afford. Which brings me to less pay. Typically, the startup will pay you less. Stock is not part of your paycheck, no matter what they tell you. Like, it is absolutely worthless. Bigger companies have bigger budgets, and they have bigger paychecks. And their stock is usually also worth something. At a startup, there's always the question of, will this company be around tomorrow? You don't have that with the bigger companies. They're a lot more stable, a lot more predictable when it comes to that. At a startup, you get to wear many hats. I could have put this in green too. But at the enterprise, you are surrounded by many people that do the same thing you do. And you have the opportunity to get mentored, the opportunity to learn in-house, on the job, while you're getting paid. These highlights are my preferences, and they've changed depending on where I was in my career. At a certain point, I always gravitated towards the startup, the smaller, the more fun, the faster speed. But I felt that at some point, I needed some financial stability. You have a kid and all that. But also, I realized that I had to learn a lot. So I went over to a big company for a couple of years. Did that, learned, it was great. And now I'm back at a small company that's getting bigger. End of the intermezzo. The next thing, as your company grows, obviously also your team will grow. At the beginning, you might be the only designer or engineer or fill in whatever. But that will change. A team will form around you. And for me personally, I was like, this design is my baby. I did this. Every pixel you see here, I've put that down. But it might not be easy to let go, but you got to remember that the people who join your team, like the team that you're creating, are people that you helped hire. Hiring people is such a great opportunity to build a group of human beings that you want to work with every day. And if you hire the right people, all of a sudden they become the co-parents of your baby, to the point where you can point at certain parts of the work that you've done and tell them, like, this is shit. I know it's shit because I made it, and we were under an insane amount of pressure to deliver. We now have a little bit more time. We have you here. I believe that you can do a better job of what I did back then. As your team grows, there's also a path to pick for you, obviously. You can become a manager, or you can stay an individual contributor. I would have written it in full, it didn't fit on the slide. But some companies give you the impression that the manager is the only way up on the ladder. It absolutely is not. I've seen many great contributors turn manager because they thought they had to, and they were very, very unhappy. The contributor path is a lot longer than a lot of people make you believe. You can have different types of impact. A manager manages people. A contributor, you can mentor others, and through that, like, change their lives and give them a chance at better careers. It's extremely satisfying. But at all times throughout the growth of your team, it is extremely important that you set the right example. When new people come in, they will look at you for inspiration. They will look at you for, like, how are things getting done here? How do people behave even? Like, how do we do meetings? So, yeah, you have a lot of responsibility there. Design tools. We all have design tools. I mean, we've seen how fast design tools can change. I've seen most of the industry a couple of years ago go from Photoshop or Fireworks to any of these amazing tools, and, like, pick whatever you think works best for you. But they will change. I don't know what tools we're going to be using in 10 years, and that should make me nervous because I work at a design tool company, and this conference is thrown by a design tool company. But I think it's super exciting. A lot of money is being poured into this space right now, and it will make it that the job we do will get easier and our tools will get better. So I'm a fan. Trends change. Design is very much like fashion. You have your basics, but often, usually around the launch of mobile operating systems recently, these trends change. It used to be just iOS. These days, Android is very, very well designed, and when they do a new big release, it changes everything. Like, a couple of weeks later, you can see that the marks that people are making are very different from before. While that changes, it is your responsibility to keep an eye on those trends, where they're moving, what works, what doesn't. In the beginning, people like to overdo things, and then it kind of swings back and it stabilizes. But you gotta keep an eye on it. I still like Dribbble for this. I'll always be grateful for Dribbble. Helped my career a ton. And even today, it gives a lot of starting designers the opportunity to get their work on a stage, viewed by the entire world by some of the best design professionals out there. And they continue to improve their platform. I specifically like the product design filter they have up there today. It's great to just hop in, take a peek at what's new and what's cool. Most importantly, the thing that changes throughout your career is you. I've mentioned your career path can have a very big impact, but what if life outside of work changes? You get married, you have a kid, or 2, or 3. You move countries. Your financial situation changes. Maybe you get a disability. Like, all of those changes might happen, will happen. You have to be able to deal with them. But yeah, it's the most important one. And you have to take care of yourself before anyone else around you. It's like when you go on an airplane, they always tell you, like, hey, if the oxygen masks come down, put on yours first before your kid. I'm like, that kind of makes sense. If you don't, you might be worthless. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to have a bad week. If you have a bad month, something's not okay. Could be at home, could be at work. But yeah, it's probably something you should figure out and ask for help. Luckily, not everything changes. There are certain skills that you use, and one of them is the design basics. Everyone can use a solid understanding of user experience, of white space, of typography, of design systems these days. Like, they've become like a base piece of knowledge that you need to know in order to do your job, no matter which tools you use. Having excellent communication skills will always help you do a better job. Being able to give critique in a very productive way, being able to receive critique in a very productive way, it makes all the difference. There's also a level of like language you speak with the people around you. Designers speak a very specific language, and I can't imagine what people think when they overhear any of our conversations. But being able to have a solid understanding of the language that your engineers speak, the language that your support team speaks, is super, super valuable. It allows you to just move through the company, get the information you need in order to deliver the best design that you can. And lastly, in this one, a skill that I find very important is knowing when someone around you needs help, but isn't specifically asking for help. You don't barge in and like, I'm here to help, but you lost your pens. Sorry, dude. Being able to pick up on signals and privately reach out, like, hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything you think someone else could help you with? Like, I'm willing to go to that person and help you get connected. Which brings me to mentoring. Mentoring someone who's newer to the job than you is, for me, one of the most satisfying parts of my job. Because you're not putting your work on hold. It's basically like pair designing. You treat them as equal. You lead them through everything you're doing and why. You help them navigate. And you change that person's life. It's phenomenal. I'm willing to bet that like, anyone in this room can learn a ton from the person sitting next to them. Anyone. There are things that they might do different. There are things that they know that you don't know, and so on. So never think that you have nothing to teach. Everyone has something to teach. This one's close to my heart. Pay it forward. I've said this countless times, but this community is based on people helping each other for free. People blogging, making sure they're writing beautiful HTML and the CSS, so when people view source, like myself 20 years ago, they can learn. The code is nicely formatted, the typography makes sense, the white space is on point, all of that. But there's also an aspect of making yourself available to people. And this can be as simple as opening up your DMs on Twitter, which I know it's not easy for everyone to do. Twitter is a shithole, and there is harassment and all of that. I'm in a position where that doesn't really bother me, but I know a lot of people personally that have been affected by that. But making yourself available for answering a question, grabbing a quick coffee, giving some feedback on their portfolio, anything, no matter how little it is, it matters. There are 2 speakers here today that I was able to help in some way, in a small way, but I think it's super important. You can also pay it forward by giving a talk about how to do this shit. But change is a constant throughout all of our careers and the people sitting next to you. Natural instinct is to fight it. But if you learn how to embrace it and how to be ready for change, I think we can all become better people and better professionals. Today's today, tomorrow will be different. Yesterday's a given, but the future is yours to create. So create wisely. Thank you.